The day my parents decided my little sister's future, they never asked what she wanted. They asked what the neighbors would think. My name is Sydney Offett. I'm 34 years old. And I still remember the exact sound my mother's voice made that Tuesday night. Tight, controlled, like someone holding a cracked plate together with both hands. She never called after 9 o'clock, never, according to my mother. People who phoned late either had terrible manners or terrible news. That night, she called at 11:07. I answered before the second ring. Mom, no greeting, no small talk, only one sentence. There's talk about your sister? I sat upright in bed immediately. Cassie, my baby sister, 19 years old, kind enough to apologize when someone else stepped on her foot, the sort of girl who cried during animal rescue commercials, who wanted to become a nurse because she believed helping strangers mattered. The idea that people were gossiping about her didn't make sense. What kind of talk? There was a long pause, then my mother sighed. The kind that follows a family? It needs to be dealt with. Can you imagine receiving a late-night phone call, only to discover your parents are more worried about gossip than whether your little sister is actually safe? That was the first moment something inside me shifted, because my mother still hadn't answered the most important question. Is Cassie okay? Another pause, longer this time. Finally, she'll be fine. If she does what's sensible. Sensible. That word had ruled my childhood. Sensible meant, don't argue, don't embarrass the family, don't make people talk. Growing up in Marlin Creek, reputation wasn't simply important. It was treated like oxygen. People protected their family name harder than they protected each other. A rumor could outlive a funeral. A whisper could ruin a business. And once people decided who you were, the truth rarely caught up. I left Marlin Creek 11 years ago, built my own life 3 hours away in Charleston, worked nights at a roadside motel to pay for college, graduated, became a paralegal specializing in family law every day. I watched frightened people sign papers they barely understood, people trapped in marriages, custody battles, families breaking apart quietly. I thought leaving that town meant leaving its rules behind. I was wrong. Because no matter how far you drive, some families always know how to pull you back. If you've ever watched someone you love stay silent because they were afraid of disappointing their family, tell me where you're watching from. I read as many comments as I can, and if you enjoy emotional family dramas with unforgettable endings, I'd love for you to subscribe to Sad Drama Stories. I told my mother I'd drive home that weekend. She didn't argue. That frightened me more than anything else. Normally, she always argued. Instead, she simply said, "Wear something nice. We're having guests." Guests for what? I asked. She ignored the question. The call ended Saturday morning. The road into Marlin Creek looked exactly as it had when I left. The white church steeple, the water tower, my father's hardware store with our family name painted in faded gold across the front window. Offett's feed and hardware in a town like ours. Your last name wasn't just your name, it was your reputation, your future, sometimes your prison. I stopped for gas just outside town. The man behind the counter recognized me instantly. He smiled. Then, the smile disappeared almost as quickly. His eyes shifted away, like he'd been discussing my family seconds before I walked in. I didn't need anyone to explain. Rumors had already spread, and in Marlin Creek, rumors always traveled faster than facts. When I finally pulled into my parents' driveway, my father's truck was already home. On a Saturday, he never left the store on Saturdays. Never, unless something mattered more than business. The front door opened before I reached the porch. My mother stood there, perfect hair, pressed blouse, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then she quietly said the sentence that changed everything. "We've found Cassie a husband. We've found Cassie a husband." For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. My little sister had just finished high school. She'd spent the last 2 years talking about nursing school, saving brochures, watching hospital documentaries, practicing taking blood pressure with a cheap cuff she'd bought online. Marriage, it wasn't even on her list. I stepped inside. The familiar smell hit me immediately, fresh lemon oil. My mother had polished every piece of furniture in the front room. She only did that for 2 occasions, funerals and important visitors. Can you imagine walking into your childhood home, only to realize it had already been prepared for a decision no one bothered to tell you about? The dining table gleamed beneath the afternoon sunlight, every chair perfectly aligned, the good china already sitting inside the glass cabinet. Whatever was happening, it had been planned long before I arrived. "Where's Cassie?" "Upstairs." "Is she okay?" My mother folded the cleaning cloth carefully. "She's emotional." "That's natural." Natural, the word made my stomach tighten. I climbed the stairs without another sentence. Cassie's bedroom door was almost closed. I knocked softly, no answer. "Cass," a tiny voice answered. "Come in." She was sitting on the edge of her bed, still wearing pajamas, her eyes swollen. She'd obviously been crying. In her hands, she kept twisting something around and around. A ring, gold, too large for her finger. Every few seconds it slipped sideways. She pushed it back into place. Again and again and again. The movement was almost unconscious. The kind people make when they're desperately trying not to panic. I sat beside her. "What's going on?" She forced a smile. It lasted less than a second. "Mom says everything will be okay." I didn't ask what Mom said. I asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want?" Cassie looked down. A long silence filled the room. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know anymore." That answer broke something inside me, because people know what they want. Fear is what convinces them they're not allowed to say it. Can you imagine becoming so afraid of disappointing everyone around you that you stop recognizing your own voice? I gently took the ring from her hand. "It's beautiful. It belongs to Garrett's grandmother." She answered automatically, as if she'd already memorized the script. "Garrett Vance," she nodded. I remembered him, 26, worked construction with his uncle, good family, good reputation, the sort of man my parents always described as solid. "Have you said yes?" Cassie's eyes filled with tears again. "Mom says it's the only way, not I love him, not I want this. The only way." Downstairs, the front door opened. Voices drifted through the hallway. My father had come home early. That alone told me how serious this had become. Dad never left the hardware store on Saturday afternoons. Business came before almost everything, unless the family name was involved. We walked downstairs together. Cassie stayed one step behind me, almost hiding. Dad kissed my forehead, then poured himself coffee without drinking it. He looked exhausted. Finally, he spoke. "People are talking." "I know. They saw Cassie leaving a young man's apartment after 2 in the morning." I frowned. "And?" He looked surprised. "And, Sydney, you know how this town works." "No, I know how rumors work. So tell me what actually happened." Silence. Nobody answered. I looked at Cassie. She hesitated. Then quietly explained everything. 2 weeks earlier, her best friend Becca became sick after a graduation party, too frightened to call her parents, too weak to drive. Cassie took her home, walked her upstairs, stayed until she stopped crying, then left just after 2 in the morning. The apartment belonged to Becca's older brother, who had been asleep the entire time. That was it. No affair, no secret boyfriend, no scandal. Just one frightened girl helping another frightened girl. Can you imagine watching your entire future disappear because someone saw the wrong person walking out of the wrong building? That's all it took. One misunderstanding, one rumor, one small town. My mother calmly folded her hands. "It doesn't matter what happened. It matters what people believe." I stared at her. Surely she couldn't mean that. Then she looked directly at Cassie. "A wedding will make everyone stop talking." I looked at my sister. She lowered her eyes, and in that moment, I realized something terrifying. No one in this house had asked whether she wanted to get married. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mother's voice. "A wedding will make everyone stop talking. Not, it will make Cassie happy. Not, it will give her a good life. Only, it will stop people talking." Funny, isn't it? Some families spend their whole lives protecting a reputation while quietly destroying the people who carry it. Can you imagine realizing your little sister isn't being married because she's in love? She's being married because someone else is embarrassed? That thought stayed with me until morning when I came downstairs. The kitchen was already busy. My mother was baking. My father was reading the local paper. Cassie stood silently at the sink washing dishes. Nobody spoke. It felt less like breakfast and more like waiting for a verdict. Finally, I broke the silence. "I want the whole story." Dad lowered the newspaper. "You already know it?" "No, I know the rumor. I want the truth." He exchanged a quick glance with Mom, then sighed. Garrett Vance has agreed to marry your sister, as if that's an answer. It is. He comes from a respected family. They're willing to move past the gossip. Move past it. I looked at Cassie. She hadn't moved. She kept staring into the sink, scrubbing the same clean plate over and over, as though staying busy meant she didn't have to. Listen, what did Cassie say? Neither of my parents answered. Instead, Mom wiped an invisible spot off the counter. Dad stirred coffee he still wasn't drinking. That silence answered everything. Nobody had asked her. Can you imagine making the biggest decision of someone's life without ever wondering what they wanted? That's exactly what had happened. I stood, walked over to my sister. Cass, she finally looked at me. Come outside. We sat on the old porch swing we'd shared as children. The paint had faded. The chains squeaked exactly the same way they always had. Some things in Marlin Creek never changed, including the fear I waited, eventually. Cassie spoke. I tried. What do you mean? The first night? I told Mom I didn't want to. She swallowed hard. She said, no isn't a word in this house. The sentence hit me harder than I expected because suddenly, I wasn't looking at my 19-year-old sister anymore. I was looking at myself, 17, packing one suitcase, leaving for college, my mother standing in this exact doorway reminding me. A good daughter doesn't disappoint her family. I'd left anyway. Cassie hadn't. Can you imagine spending your entire childhood believing the word no didn't belong to you? That's not obedience. That's fear. And fear has a way of sounding exactly like agreement. I reached for her hand. Cass, if nobody else asks, I will. What do you want? Tears rolled down her face, not loud crying, just silent tears. I wanted nursing school. I know. I wanted to leave town. I know. I wanted. She stopped, then whispered. I just wanted everyone to stop being ashamed of me. My heart broke because she still believed. She'd done something wrong. She hadn't. A kind girl had helped her frightened friend get home safely. That wasn't shameful. The lie was, back inside, voices echoed through the hallway. The Vance family had arrived, earlier than expected. Mary Bate Vance entered first, elegant, perfectly dressed, the kind of woman who smiled with her mouth, but never with her eyes. Behind her walked Garrett, tall, confident, looking around the house like someone inspecting property before signing the papers. He barely looked at Cassie. When he finally did, it wasn't with affection, it was with satisfaction, as if the decision had already been made. Lunch passed awkwardly, parents talked, neighbors laughed, plans were discussed. Only two people remained silent, Cassie and Garrett. At one point, I deliberately asked, so Garrett, what do you and Cassie enjoy doing together? He blinked, looked confused, then shrugged. We'll figure it out. My stomach tightened. He didn't know her favorite color, didn't know she loved old medical documentaries, didn't know she wanted to become a nurse. He didn't know anything about her. Because none of that mattered to anyone. After dessert, I carried plates into the kitchen. The adults stayed behind talking. Then, without meaning to, I overheard something that changed everything. Mary Bate Vance spoke quietly enough that she thought no one else could hear. We'll finally get the back 40, my father answered. You'll have it after the wedding. Back 40, the strip of family land behind the hardware store. The land Dad had refused to sell for over 20 years. I stood completely still, listening, and suddenly, I realized this wasn't just about saving my sister's reputation. It was a business deal, and my sister was part of the payment. I didn't say anything in the kitchen, not yet. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is interrupt people while they're telling you the truth. So I kept drying plates, kept smiling, kept listening. Mary Bate Vance stirred her coffee. The land borders the creek, doesn't it? My father nodded. 42 acres, beautiful property, and after the wedding, it'll stay in the family. Stay in the family, such harmless words. Unless you knew what they really meant, because suddenly, I understood something that made my stomach turn. Cassie wasn't just becoming a bride, she was becoming part of a transaction. Can you imagine realizing your little sister wasn't being chosen because someone loved her? She was being exchanged because two families wanted something from each other? That realization changed everything. I quietly carried the empty serving tray back into the dining room. Garrett was leaning comfortably in his chair, laughing with my father. Not once had he asked Cassie if she was all right. Not once had he looked toward her. She sat silently, turning that oversized engagement ring around her finger again. Round and round and round, fear has habits. That ring had become hers. Later that evening, I found Dad alone on the back porch. The sun had almost disappeared behind the hills. The hardware store sign could still be seen from our yard, our family name painted across the front. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "The land." His shoulders stiffened immediately. "What about it? Are you giving it to the Vances?" He sighed. "It's part of the agreement." Agreement, not marriage, agreement. I looked directly at him. "So you're trading your daughter for 42 acres and a quiet town?" His face hardened. "I'm protecting this family." "No, you're protecting your reputation." "They're the same thing." "No, Dad, they're not." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly said something that hurt more than I expected. "You left, Cassie stayed. She understands responsibility." I stared at him. Responsibility? Helping a frightened friend wasn't irresponsible. Destroying your daughter's future was. Can you imagine hearing your own father praise obedience while sacrificing the child who obeyed him? That's exactly what was happening. I walked back inside. My mother was folding napkins, preparing for another dinner with the Vances. Everything had become preparation. Menus, guest lists, wedding dates. Everyone discussed flowers. No one discussed Cassie. Upstairs, I found her sitting on the floor beside her bed. College brochures surrounded her, nursing schools, scholarship applications, student housing information. She picked one up, ran her fingers across the cover, then quietly placed it back into the pile. "I guess I won't need these anymore." I sat beside her. "Who told you that?" She shrugged. "No one. They didn't have to." She smiled sadly. "When people stop talking about your dreams, you know they've already buried them." I felt tears sting my eyes because she was right. Not one person downstairs had mentioned nursing school. Not one. Only weddings, dress fittings, guest lists. Can you imagine watching someone else's future disappear without anyone even noticing? I reached for one of the brochures. "Barton School of Nursing? You really wanted this," she nodded. "Since I was 12. I wanted to help people." Then she laughed softly, a broken laugh. "Funny, I couldn't even help myself." I squeezed her hand. "You still can." Before she could answer, voices drifted up the staircase. Garrett. He'd come back inside after saying goodbye. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but then I heard him laughing. "It doesn't matter. They always settle in, always. Not hopefully, not, I think. Always." Like he wasn't talking about a person, like he was talking about breaking in a horse or training a dog. My blood ran cold. Then he added one more sentence. "The land alone makes it worth it." Silence. I stood completely still. He knew about the land. He knew exactly why this marriage was happening, and somehow, that made it even worse. Because this wasn't just my parents forcing my sister into a marriage. Garrett understood the bargain, and accepted it anyway. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, because I was thinking not like a daughter. Not like an older sister, like a paralegal. Every day, I watched contracts being signed. Some lasted, some didn't. Every valid contract required one thing: consent, real, freely given consent. Around midnight, I opened my laptop, typed 6 simple words into the search bar: marriage under duress, West Virginia law. The first result made my heart start racing, because for the first time since I'd driven back to Marlin Creek, I realized something. This family thought they were planning a wedding. They had no idea they were building it on legal quicksand. I read the same sentence 3 times, then a 4th. Then I called Ruth. If there was one person I trusted more than anyone when it came to family law, it was her. 30 years in court, hundreds of custody battles, thousands of contracts. Ruth never guessed, she verified. She answered on the first ring. "Sydney, I need 5 minutes." "You have as many as you need." I explained everything: the rumor, the rushed engagement, the pressure, Cassie's fear, the land, the Vances, my parents. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she asked only one question: "Did your sister freely agree?" I closed my eyes. "No." "Did anyone threaten her?" "Not directly. They told her she'd disgrace the family. They said she had no choice. They told her no wasn't an answer." Silence. Then Ruth spoke carefully. "A marriage isn't just a ceremony. It's a legal contract. And contracts require free consent. Can you imagine discovering the very thing your family believes will solve everything? could actually fall apart because the law recognizes something they refuse to acknowledge: consent. Real consent, not silence, not fear, not surrender, consent. Ruth continued. If Cassie walks into that marriage because she's frightened, she may have grounds to challenge it. I sat quietly. So they can't force her, they can pressure her, they can shame her, but they can't make fear become consent. Those words stayed with me long after we ended the call. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a family argument anymore. It was something much simpler. Someone needed to ask my sister what she wanted. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office, not to file anything, not to cause trouble, just to understand. The clerk smiled politely. Can I help you? I'd like a marriage license application. For yourself? No, I just want to read it. She slid the form across the counter without another question. I carried it to a small wooden table near the window. Read every line. Slowly, then I found it. Both applicants must appear in person. Both applicants must sign. No parents, no representatives. No one else could answer for them. Only the two people getting married. Simple, obvious, powerful. I folded the blank form carefully, placed it inside my purse, not as evidence, not as a weapon, as a reminder. Even the law expected people to speak for themselves. Why didn't my family? Can you imagine a stranger behind a government counter respecting your sister's voice more than her own parents? That realization hurt more than I expected. On my way home, I stopped at the church. Pastor Dale was trimming roses near the entrance. He smiled warmly. Sydney, it's been too long. We talked about ordinary things, the weather, the roof repairs, the upcoming church picnic. Then, almost casually, I asked, how do you know when someone truly wants to get married? He smiled. You ask them. And if you're not sure, his smile faded. Then you ask again. I looked toward the sanctuary. What if you believed? And the bride was saying yes because she was terrified to say no? Pastor Dale became very quiet. He rested both hands on the hedge trimmers, then slowly answered, I couldn't stand before God knowing that. I nodded, didn't argue, didn't explain. Sometimes you don't need to convince good people. You only need to let their conscience catch up. As I walked back toward my car, I realized something important. I didn't need the whole town to agree with me. I didn't need my parents to change. I only needed one thing, one honest moment, one room, one question, asked in front of the right people. That evening, I found Cassie sitting alone on the back steps. The engagement ring was still too loose, still spinning around her finger. I sat beside her. If someone gave you the chance to say no, in front of everyone, could you do it? She didn't answer for nearly a minute. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. I don't know. I looked at my little sister, 19 years old, bright, kind, smart enough for nursing school, yet somehow, she'd spent her whole life believing her own voice didn't matter. I took her hand. You don't have to decide tonight, but promise me one thing. What? When the moment comes, listen to yourself. Not mom, not dad, not me, yourself. She nodded slowly, then squeezed my hand. At that moment, I didn't know exactly how I was going to stop this wedding, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The engagement celebration was only 2 weeks away. Both families would be there. The pastor would be there. Half the town would be there. And before anyone raised a glass to celebrate, I was going to ask one question that nobody in that room was prepared to answer. The engagement lunch was 2 weeks away. 14 days, it didn't sound like much. Until you realized an entire life could be redirected in less time than that. Every morning, the house became busier, guest lists, flower arrangements, church reservations. My mother moved from room to room carrying notebooks and checklists. She looked happier than she had in months, not because her daughter was getting married, because the town would finally stop talking. Can you imagine planning a wedding with more excitement than the bride herself? That was exactly what was happening. Cassie, on the other hand, seemed to disappear a little more every day. She barely ate, barely slept. She answered every question with, whatever you think, or, it doesn't matter. One afternoon, I found her standing alone in the laundry room, holding her nursing school acceptance letter. She hadn't opened it in days. I can't look at it anymore, she whispered. Why? Because it hurts. She carefully folded the envelope again. As soon as I read it, I remember the life I won't have. No 19-year-old should ever have to say those words. Not because of fear, not because of gossip, certainly not because of someone else's reputation. Can you imagine giving up your biggest dream just to make other people comfortable? That's what my sister believed she had to do. That evening, I decided to give my parents one final chance, not to argue, not to accuse, just to tell them the truth. Dad sat in his usual chair reading the paper. Mom was polishing silverware. I placed the folded marriage license application on the table. I need 5 minutes. Neither of them spoke. I looked at Mom first. A marriage requires two people who freely agree, she sighed. We've already discussed this. No, you discussed appearances. I'm discussing the law. Dad lowered his newspaper. I continued calmly. If Cassie is pressured into this marriage, it isn't as secure as you think. Mom laughed softly. You've always made simple things complicated. This isn't complicated. It's consent. Cassie hasn't freely chosen this. My mother's expression hardened. A wedding fixes everything. No, it hides everything. For the first time, Dad looked uneasy. I could see it. He understood contracts, business, agreements. He knew exactly what I meant, but he remained silent. Then Mom said the sentence she'd repeated my entire life. Only what people say matters. I looked at her. No, only because you've taught yourself to believe that. Silence filled the kitchen. Nobody moved. Finally, Mom stood. I won't have you embarrass this family. The engagement lunch is Saturday. You'll smile, you'll congratulate your sister, and you'll keep your opinions to yourself. She thought she was ending the conversation. Instead, she'd unknowingly answered my biggest question. The engagement lunch, not the wedding, that was where everyone important would gather. Both families, neighbors, church members, Pastor Dale, witnesses. Exactly the people who needed to hear one honest question. I smiled politely. Good night, Mom. She frowned. She expected another argument. Instead, I simply walked upstairs. Sometimes the strongest move isn't continuing the fight. It's letting someone believe they've already won. The next morning, I overheard Garrett talking on his phone outside. He didn't know I was inside the screened porch. He was laughing. The engagement's handled. My mom took care of everything. A pause, then, Cassie's nervous, but they'll always come around. They, not she, they, like women weren't individuals, just another group to be managed. He laughed again. The land alone makes this worth it. My hands tightened around the coffee mug. There it was, the truth, simple, ugly, honest. He wasn't marrying my sister, he was acquiring land, and he wasn't even ashamed of it. Every doubt disappeared. I wasn't ruining a love story, there wasn't one. I wasn't breaking apart two happy families, they were already broken. I was stopping a business deal, disguised as a marriage. Later that afternoon, I found Cassie upstairs packing away her nursing books. I stopped her. Wait. I handed her a blank sheet of paper. She looked confused. I want you to write something. What? The truth. She frowned. I don't understand. Write what you'd say if nobody interrupted you, if nobody judged you, if nobody could punish you. She stared at the paper for a long time, then, slowly, she began to write. When she finished, she folded it carefully, held it against her chest. What do I do with it? I smiled. Nothing. It's yours. You don't have to show anyone. I just wanted you to hear your own voice. For the first time in days, she smiled. A tiny smile, but a real one. The engagement lunch was tomorrow. In my purse, I carried one folded piece of paper. In Cassie's hand, she carried another. Neither one was a weapon, both contained the truth. And before that lunch was over, one quiet question was about to bring the entire arrangement crashing down. Saturday arrived, bright, warm, beautiful. The kind of day people describe as perfect for a celebration. Funny how often the prettiest days hide the ugliest truths. The church hall had been polished until every table reflected the afternoon light. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, good china, and that familiar smell, lemon oil. The same smell that filled our front room whenever my mother wanted the family to look perfect. Neighbors filled the hall, one conversation at a time. The Hendersons, the Proots, old Mrs. Calloway, people who had watched me grow up. People who already believed they knew this story. My father moved through the room, shaking hands, smiling, relaxed for the first time in weeks. He believed the problem was finally over. My mother looked radiant. She accepted congratulations like someone collecting proof she'd done the right thing. Across the room, Cassie sat quietly beside Garrett. Her pale blue dress was beautiful, her expression wasn't. She kept turning that loose engagement ring around her finger, again and again and again. Fear still had its habit. Can you imagine sitting in a room where everyone is celebrating your future while you're silently mourning it? That was my sister. I caught Pastor Dale's eye across the room. He gave me the smallest nod, not encouragement. Understanding, he knew something wasn't right. The lunch began. Ham, potato salad, homemade rolls. People laughed. Talked about weddings, talked about family. Nobody asked the bride how she felt. Eventually, my father stood, tapped his glass with a spoon. The room became quiet. My friends, thank you for celebrating this wonderful day with us. He spoke about family, tradition, faith, second chances. He never once mentioned the rumor. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew why they were really there. Then Mary Bate Vance stood. She smiled graciously. This isn't just about two young people. It's about two good families coming together. The room nodded in agreement. Then my father turned toward Cassie. Honey, would you like to say a few words? Cassie stood. Her hands trembled. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. 5 seconds passed, then 10. The silence grew heavier. My mother's smile began to crack. Under the table, I saw Cassie's thumb turning that loose ring one more time. It was time. I stood, slowly, calmly. No shouting, no drama, just one woman standing beside her little sister. Before we continue, I'd like to ask one question. Every face turned toward me. My father frowned. Sydney, it's only one question. I reached into my purse, removed one folded piece of paper, the blank marriage license application I'd carried for 2 weeks. I placed it gently in the middle of the table. No dramatic gestures. No accusations, just paper. Then I looked directly at Mary Bate Vance. Mrs. Vance, when Garrett and Cassie apply for their marriage license, they'll both have to appear in person. They'll both have to sign. They'll both have to confirm that they're entering this marriage freely. The room became completely silent. I continued, I work in family law, and I know something everyone here seems to have forgotten. A marriage requires free consent. I looked around the room, then asked the only question that mattered. If Cassie tells a judge she agreed because she was pressured, what exactly do you think happens to this marriage? Nobody answered, not my parents, not Garrett, not the neighbors, only silence. Mary Bate looked at the paper, then at Cassie, then slowly around the room. She understood immediately. A marriage built on fear could become a public legal battle, exactly the opposite of what she'd wanted. She quietly folded her napkin, stood, looked at Garrett. We're leaving, just like that, no shouting, no argument, no engagement, only footsteps. Garrett looked stunned. But now, he followed his mother out of the hall. The engagement had ended before dessert. Then my mother exploded. Do you have any idea what you've done? Her voice echoed through the room. You've humiliated this family. I waited until she finished, then answered softly. No, Mom, you did. You tried to trade your daughter to protect your reputation. The room went completely still. Nobody defended her. Nobody defended my father. For the first time, the truth spoke louder than the gossip. Then, something beautiful happened. Cassie slowly removed the oversized engagement ring, placed it carefully beside the folded marriage application. Click, that tiny sound felt louder than every speech that afternoon. She looked directly at our parents. Tears rolled down her face. I never said yes. I only stopped saying no. Then she took a deep breath. I want to go to nursing school. I want my own life. And I won't marry someone just because you're afraid of what people might say. Pastor Dale stood quietly. There will be no wedding, not without a willing bride. That was the end, not with screaming, not with revenge, with truth. A week later, Cassie moved to Charleston with me. She enrolled in nursing school that fall. Today, she's exactly where she always dreamed of being, helping people, saving lives, living a life she chose herself. My father lost his campaign for the church board, not because of the original rumor, because the town saw something worse. A father willing to sacrifice his daughter's future for his reputation. My mother eventually admitted something she'd hidden for decades. When she was 19, her own family forced her into a hurried marriage after gossip nearly ruined her name. She truly believed she was protecting Cassie the only way she'd ever been taught. I understood her, but understanding isn't the same as excusing. Some wounds heal, some become boundaries. Every Sunday, I still call my parents. But now, There's one rule: Cassie always has a place in my home, and one word is always respected there. No, because no isn't disrespect, it isn't rebellion. Sometimes, it's the bravest sentence a person will ever say. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever watched someone you love stay silent because they were afraid to disappoint their family? What would you have done in Sydney's place? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might give someone else the courage to find their own voice. And if you enjoy emotional family dramas, unforgettable endings, and powerful stories about courage, justice, and self-worth, I'd be honored if you subscribe to Sad Drama Stories. Thank you for watching, and remember, a family that won't let you say no isn't protecting your future, it's choosing it for you.